Imagine holding in your hands a document that the world's elites tried to keep hidden for centuries. A document that foretold the fall of every great empire in human history. And this document is not some classified archive of secret services. It is the Bible. Today, we will uncover the code hidden within these ancient texts. A code that describes with frightening precision the geopolitical upheavals of our time. But be warned, what you are about to discover may forever change the way you see the modern world. When the prophet Daniel received his vision of the 4 beasts rising from the sea, he could never have imagined he was sketching the map of 21st century wars. When John of Patmos wrote the book of Revelation on the island of Patmos in Greece, he had no idea he was painting a portrait of modern geopolitics. Perhaps you're thinking, this is just coincidence. The Bible is a spiritual book, not a political forecast. But what if I told you that every great empire of the last 2,000 years collapsed exactly according to the script described in Holy Scripture? Now here's a question that could keep you awake all night. Is it possible that today's world leaders are acting out a script written 2,000 years ago without even realizing it? Let's begin with the most terrifying image. In the book of Daniel, the prophet describes a vision of a statue with a head of gold, chest of silver, belly of bronze, and legs of iron. Each part symbolizes a great empire. But the most disturbing detail, the feet made of clay and iron. Empires that appear mighty on the outside, yet fragile within. The ancient prophet looks at us across the millennia, his eyes filled with sorrow for humanity's future. He sees empires rising and falling like waves crashing on the shore of eternity, and each wave is higher than the last, each more destructive. Take the Roman Empire. 1,000 years of dominance, legions that made nations tremble, amphitheaters where blood was spilled for sport. Rome seemed eternal, yet the Apostle John wrote of the whore of Babylon sitting on the scarlet beast, and Rome fell, not from an external enemy, but from within decay, moral corruption that eroded the empire at its core. And what about today? Look around. The empires of the 21st century bear all the marks of those feet of iron mixed with clay. Outward strength, inner fragility. Technological power combined with spiritual emptiness. A modern researcher bends over a world map. Red marks indicate conflict zones. Ukraine, the Middle East, the tensions between superpowers. Each mark lines up precisely with the locations described in prophecy. This cannot be coincidence. Do you know what is most frightening? The biblical prophecies speak not only of the fall of empires, but of what comes after their collapse. A time of chaos when nation will rise against nation and kingdom against kingdom. Now we uncover the deepest secret. The Bible is written in the language of symbols, but these symbols are not mere metaphors. They are a code that deciphers the patterns of history. The beast from the sea in Revelation is not just a literary image. It is an algorithm of how empires rise and fall. The 7 heads of the beast represent 7 forms of power that have ruled throughout history. And here lies the point. We are living in the age of the final head. The ancient prophet saw our time as the end of a great cycle. Empire after empire rose, reached the height of power, and collapsed under its own weight. Yet each one was stronger than the last, and each collapse more devastating. Consider the symbol of Babylon in Revelation. It is not simply an ancient city. It is the archetype of a civilization that exalted the material above the spiritual. A civilization where trade became religion and money its god. Doesn't that sound familiar? The modern global economy, where everything is bought and sold, where financial markets dictate the fate of nations, where giant corporations wield more power than governments. John of Patmos describes merchants weeping over the ruins of Babylon. Woe! Woe, O great city, clothed in fine linen, purple and scarlet, and glittering with gold, precious stones, and pearls. In 1 hour such great wealth has been brought to ruin. Now think of modern financial crises. How in just days the empires of capital collapse. How billions of dollars vanish in an instant, as if some unseen hand guides these events according to an ancient script. The emperors of the past look at us from portraits in museums. Napoleon, Alexander the Great, the Caesars of Rome. In their eyes, the eternal drama of power. Each believed his empire would last forever. Each was wrong. A modern researcher discovers a strange pattern. Every great empire goes through the same stages: rise, glory, decadence, fall, and the time between these stages keeps shrinking. History itself seems to be accelerating, rushing toward the finale of a grand play. What is most astonishing is that the biblical prophets foresaw even this acceleration. In the last days, perilous times will come, and the days will be shortened for the sake of the elect. The most mysterious aspect of biblical prophecy is its geographical precision. The prophets did not only foretell the fall of empires, they pointed to the exact places where humanity's final conflicts would unfold. The prophet Ezekiel speaks of the war of Gog from the land of Magog. For centuries these ancient names seemed shrouded in mystery, but modern researchers have identified Magog with the territories of present-day Russia, and the conflict Ezekiel describes bears a striking resemblance to today's geopolitical tensions. The ancient prophet sees armies marching from the north. He sees alliances of nations that had never fought together before. He sees wars for resources, for control over sacred sites. And here is what is most frightening. The prophecies describe not just any war, but the war that will be the last. A conflict of such magnitude that the world will never be the same afterward. A modern researcher compares maps in ancient biblical map and a modern map of conflicts. The overlap is astonishing. Ukraine lies precisely at the crossroads of ancient trade routes, mentioned in the prophecies as the site of a great clash. The Middle East, the region where the focus of all the prophets converges. Jerusalem will become a stone of stumbling for all nations. For 2,000 years, this verse seemed like a metaphor. Today, it is a geopolitical reality. The emperors of the past longed to control these lands. Alexander the Great, the Caesars of Rome, the Crusaders, the Ottoman sultans all sought to rule the same territories that the biblical prophecies mark as the center of the final battle. But perhaps most astonishing are the prophecies about the rebirth of Israel. For 2,000 years the Jewish people were scattered across the world. The prophets declared, "I will gather you from the nations and bring you back into your own land." In 1948, this prophecy was fulfilled, and immediately after the rebirth of Israel, the very conflicts described in the Bible began, as if the apocalypse timer had been set in motion. Every war in the Middle East fits the ancient descriptions with eerie precision. Now comes the most terrifying question. If the prophecies about Israel's restoration and regional conflicts have come true, with such accuracy, what awaits us at the end of this script? The Bible describes the final empire of humanity, an empire that unites all the previous ones, an empire that will appear perfect, yet hide within itself the seeds of its own destruction. The ancient prophet sees this empire as a beast with 10 horns, 10 centers of power, united under a single authority. Does this not resemble today's global alliances? The G7, the G20, international organizations that effectively govern the world. The prophet Daniel spoke of a time when knowledge shall increase and many shall travel. 2,000 years ago, such words seemed like fantasy. Today they are our reality. The internet, air travel, globalization, all foretold in the ancient texts. But most alarming is the prophecy about a mark on the forehead or hand, without which no one will be able to buy or sell. 50 years ago, this sounded like mysticism. Today we call it digital identifiers, biometric data, electronic currency. A modern researcher studies the statistics, the speed of globalization, the rise of digital technologies, the concentration of power in the hands of a few corporations. Every graph shows exponential growth, as if some unseen force is driving humanity toward a final point. The emperors of the past dreamed of a world empire, but they lacked the technology to achieve it. Today, such tools exist. Global communications, surveillance systems, artificial intelligence. For the first time in history, it is technically possible to create an empire that spans the entire planet. And here is the most terrifying question. Could it be that we are living in the very formation of that last empire the prophets warned about? Look around. Global elites gathering at closed forums to decide the fate of billions. International organizations wielding power over sovereign states. Corporations controlling information flows and shaping public opinion. The Bible warns. The final empire will appear benevolent. It will bring peace, prosperity, security. But the price will be freedom, and authority was given him over every tribe, people, language, and nation. The ancient prophet weeps as he looks into the future of humanity. He sees people willingly giving up freedom in exchange for safety. He sees technology created for good twisted into instruments of control. Isn't that what we see today? Pandemics used to justify restrictions of rights. Environmental crises demanding global governance. Terrorist threats legitimizing total surveillance. The strangest part of biblical prophecy is its description of the signs of the times, natural and social phenomena that will accompany the end of the age of empires. There will be earthquakes in various places, and famines and plagues. Statistics reveal that the number of natural disasters has multiplied in recent decades. The planet's climate is shifting at a rate unnatural to geology. The ancient prophet foresaw a time when people will be lovers of themselves, lovers of money, boastful, proud. Isn't that exactly what we see today? An age of social media where self-promotion is the norm and success is measured by followers. People will be without natural affection, unforgiving, slanderous. Modern society is dividing into hostile camps. Political polarization has reached a point where dialogue becomes impossible. A modern researcher analyzes sociological data. Rates of depression, suicide, and addiction rise every year despite material progress, as if humanity is losing something more vital than wealth and technology. The emperors of the past faced uprisings, but they could always crush them with force. Today, authority faces a crisis of legitimacy. People are ceasing to believe in traditional institutions, and because lawlessness will increase, the love of many will grow cold. This verse from the Gospel describes the moral collapse of the last days. Isn't that what we see around us? Indifference to the suffering of others, the erosion of moral anchors, relativism that denies the existence of absolute values. But perhaps most disturbing are the prophecies about the state of the church in the last days. There will be teachers who gather disciples to suit their own desires. Religion turns into show business, spirituality into a commodity. The ancient prophet foresaw a time when faith would be formal and love cold, when people would have a form of godliness but deny its power. Look at modern Christianity. Megachurches with million-dollar budgets, prosperity theology that promises earthly blessings in exchange for faith. Isn't this the form of godliness without its essence? The most frightening fact is that all these signs are appearing simultaneously. Never in human history has there been an era where so many prophetic markers aligned at once. And now the ultimate question. If the biblical prophecies are this precise, can we change the future? Does humanity have a choice, or is everything already predetermined? The ancient prophet gives an ambiguous answer. On one hand, he says, if those days had not been shortened, no flesh would be saved. On the other, he promises, for the sake of the elect, those days will be shortened. A modern researcher faces a paradox. The prophecies are inevitably being fulfilled, yet within them lies hope. Not for empires, not for systems of power, but for individuals who keep their faith. Empire after empire collapsed, but something always survived. Something in the human soul that no power could conquer. An emperor may seize the body, but he cannot seize the spirit. Perhaps the true purpose of biblical prophecy is not to frighten us with the future, but to show that even in the darkest times there is a choice, not between empires, but between serving the system and serving the conscience. The prophets warned of the fall of empires, not so we would try to save them, but so we would not place our hope in what is destined to perish. Do not put your trust in princes and mortal men who cannot save. These words of the psalmist sound like a covenant for our time. Do not place your hope in politicians, corporations, international organizations. They are all part of a system, rushing toward its end. The emperors of the past promised eternal rule. Today's elites promise global prosperity. But the prophets warn, all human kingdoms are temporary. Only one kingdom is eternal, and it is not of this world. Here lies the deepest secret of biblical prophecy. They describe not only the end of the old world, but also the birth of the new. Not only the fall of empires, but the coming of a kingdom that will never be destroyed. And the God of heaven will set up a kingdom that will never be destroyed. After all the empires, after all the catastrophes, something entirely new must come. Not another empire, but a new way of existence. And now we come to the greatest secret. The biblical prophecies describe the end of the age of empires, but they do not reveal all the details of what comes after. The ancient prophet sees a new heaven and a new earth, where there will be no more death or mourning or crying. But how will this happen? When? Under what conditions? Perhaps the uncertainty itself holds the key lesson. The future is not rigidly predetermined. It depends on the choices we make today. A modern researcher closes the last book, the last map, the final report. All the facts have been gathered, all the patterns analyzed. But the most important question remains unanswered. What will we do with this knowledge? The emperors of the past tried to use prophecy to strengthen their power. Some modern leaders do the same. But prophecy is not meant to serve power. It is meant to free us from the illusions of power. Perhaps the most frightening thing is not that empires will fall. The most frightening thing is that we might live our lives placing hope in what is doomed to perish. The Bible gives us a map of the future, not so we would live in fear, but so we would be prepared. Not for the end of the world, but for the beginning of something new. The ancient prophet looks at us one last time. In his eyes not terror, but hope. He knows something we are only beginning to grasp. Every ending is a new beginning, and now the choice is yours. You can set this knowledge aside as just another theory, or you can ask yourself, what if it is true? What if the prophets were truly warning us about our time? What if the end of empires is not the end of history, but its true beginning? Perhaps this is the real mystery of biblical prophecy, not in predicting the future, but in preparing us for it, not in fear of the end, but in hope for what comes after. The history of empires is ending, but the history of humanity is only beginning. Asterisk. If this video made you think, share it with those you trust. For the greatest danger in our time is not ignorance of the truth, but being left alone with it. And if you want to understand more deeply the connection between ancient prophecies and modern events, subscribe to the channel. Even greater discoveries lie ahead. Remember, to know the future is not a gift, but a responsibility. See you in the next video. Asterisk.